And then again, to find the Zoom meeting links, you go to the LifeQuest of Arkansas website under online engagements. You have to click on that twice and it'll open up underneath John Brummett's video. You'll see the Zoom classes. The meeting times should be a direct link to the meetings themselves, or you can copy and paste that number. Okay, I think we're going to get started. Gina, is there anything else I need to say? You can unmute.
No.
Yep, I just muted you.
I think we're good. We'll let Ken get started.
Okay, Ken, take it away.
Okay, is everybody ready? Got your coffee? I got mine. Usually, this is a part of my sketching class where we talk about the landscape and the environment. You know, we do all kinds of sketching, and landscape is generally not the main thing we talk about, but everything we do has a landscape. You're probably going to do some sky for sure. I generally do this in 2 classes, with first class covering skies and vegetation, and the second one covering anything like stones and mountains and rocks and dirt and gravel and water, any way to do that. But today we're going to talk about skies and ways to paint them and what we're looking for when we see a sky and some things we can do to enhance our sky pictures. So sky and clouds. The sky always sets the mood in your paintings. If you've got a nice, warm, sunny sky, then your painting is going to feel that way, and you're going to want to unify your painting by having nice, warm, sunny colors in the rest of your painting too. If you've got a gray, cloudy day, you're going to have muted colors, and the whole mood of your painting is going to be kind of subdued and muted because of that sky and how the rest of the environment interacts with it. When you're out sketching, you know, take time to make sky notes occasionally. Here's just a page out of a little sketchbook I carry with me. And I was at Petit Jean and sitting there watching the sky. It was a beautiful day with a lot of mist and fog and things like that. And so rather than try and paint a picture of this, which was moving very quickly, I made a lot of sky notes, where the sun was, how it interacted with the fog and mist, what the clouds looked like, and made color notes so that if I wanted to paint that again, I would have these color notes to go by of what it really looked like at that time. So it's a good thing to do, and it's fun to just sit out and try and draw clouds. When you try and do that, you'll find that they're just constantly changing, and you can hardly paint a whole cloud before it's just totally something different with different shadows and everything else, especially on a day when they're really moving. So take some color notes with that and give it a go. Some of the colors we use in our sky, you think, well, blue, we're going to put blue up there. There's a lot of different kinds of blue, and they do a lot of different things. Generally, if you wanted to match an Arkansas sky, which you couldn't today because it's white looking out my window, it wouldn't take much. But generally, Arkansas blue sky is cerulean blue chromium. You could just put that up there and you would have a blue sky. A little more intense would be cobalt blue. I've been using that a lot, and the reason is it lifts just a little better. It's semi-opaque. If you'll notice on these color samples here, they've got a little code on them, and that half moon next to cerulean blue and cobalt blue means they're semi-opaque, semi-transparent. So that they're a little harder to lift sometimes because of that, and also they'll cover a little more, but cobalt actually lifts a whole lot easier than the cerulean when you, especially if you're using bad paper like I often do. So it's something to keep in mind. The ultramarine blue is transparent. It does sediment very well. It makes a nice granulation in the sky. It's a good warm color for a summer sky. A lot of people just use that as their go-to blue for skies, and it works fine for that. I like more sky variation, more color in my skies, as you'll see, than that. The manganese blue hue is really a weak color. You just really, I find myself scrubbing and scrubbing that, trying to get enough color off. And it's greener than even the cerulean blue chromium, which you would call a cyan actually, but the manganese blue hue is even more in that way. It's really good for tropical skies. If you're down on the coast or something, that's a great tropical sky color to use. Phthalo blue is a kind of a nice blue if you're very careful with it. This stuff stains and you're not going to lift it out. You get it too dark, it's kind of too bad. I generally don't like to mess with phthalo blue other than to mix a really dark color with it. You mix it with an orange, you can get a really good blackish kind of color. But otherwise, I don't mess with it in the skies, especially when I'm out sketching, because I want things convenient when I'm sketching and don't want to have to fight my colors or anything. Prussian blue works really good for a blue on a really cloudy, kind of dull day. It just has a kind of an oppressive sort of a quality to it as you wash it out, a lot of grays in it. And makes very good blue sky mixed with dark clouds and things. So I kind of like it for that. But when it comes down to it, you can just put about anything in the sky. I can't think of a single color that you can't. Other useful ones that I use a lot in blue skies are cobalt teal blue particularly. That mixes really well with cerulean to put a little stripe of that across the sky, and cobalt violet to warm it up. You can use any kind of purple and you can mix it too. When I'm out sketching, though, I don't like to do a lot of unnecessary mixing, and that is just so convenient. Swipe through there with my water brush right there. That's the one I use a lot for skies. You can see that. Oh, that's a flat. Hold the wrong one out there. This one, which is a big round, it's actually a flat that has had the little thing that makes it stay flat like that. I pulled it off so that I have a real soppy round brush to do sky with when I'm out sketching and don't have to deal with much of anything else when I've got that. I use Naples yellow. A lot of people don't know about Naples yellow or don't use it that much. It's very opaque, really. It's kind of halfway, they show there. And if you use it very dilute, it's not opaque at all. But the good thing about it is it doesn't tend to turn green if you put blue over the top of it. And you can make some really nice skies by putting an undercoat down there of Naples yellow and letting it dry. And then put your cerulean blue over the top of it gently in a light coat. And you get a really, really nice warm sky that way. And of course, alizarin crimson is good for sunrises and sunsets. I don't paint a whole lot of sunsets. I guess I'm home by then. Do some morning stuff a lot, but haven't really done that many sunsets. Why here? Useful brushes for skies, a big one. Tell you what I really like are these. These are called Zen brushes. They're Royal Langnicker. They're really cheap, like $4. This one is a number 14, and it's just a mop. You can get, a $50 squirrel mop, like something like this, only larger, and it will do a really good job too. But this does the same, and actually between these two, this one would do a much better job for most of what I do than the better brush would do. This is good for anything up to about 8 by 10, 11 by 14s. If you want to go to a quarter sheet or something a little larger, then I would use this one. This one is called an MD, same kind of Zen brush, a Z83WR. It's just bigger. Here's the two compared, as you can see. There we go. And this is a little big for 8.5 by 11. You get maybe too much water on it. But generally, when we're talking painting skies, there's no such thing as too much water. I most always see that people are painting don't use enough water, and causes the most problems. Another useful brush in skies, and I'll show you some examples later of where I've used this. This is just about a 1/2 inch, maybe not quite 1/2 inch hog bristle brush for oil painting or whatever, but for watercolor too, you can use these. These are great. The old 3/4 inch flat, that will work. That never really holds enough water for me, and for a number of reasons, I don't really like it nearly as well as something like a mop brush. This seems to make a lot better sky. Another thing useful for sky is, well, not that rag, this squirt bottle here for making rain. This is my rain maker when I do skies. Or if you want to really smooth the sky out, that's a great way to do it. It'll do it in a hurry for you and take care of a lot of problems that you might have. So those are basically the brushes that I would use for this sort of thing. Now let's talk a little bit just about how clouds actually appear and look and how they form. When you look at a cloud facing the sun, especially at later parts of the day or early morning, you can often see a yellow tinge to them on the edge that faces the sun. And that's a nice thing to add to your sky. It's another color you can put up there and warm things up. And I'll show you some examples of that later too. Another thing to realize is clouds puff up and they boil and there's a lot of motion. You don't want clouds that droop. It will look really strange. So make sure, think of a boiling pot of water when you draw a cloud and make those boils come out in all directions, maybe also with the direction of wind and things like that. Put shadows throughout your cloud. You don't want just a big white thing there that looks like you glued a piece of white paper onto your sky. You need shadows, particularly on the underneath of the cloud, but on the underneath side of the boils as well. And be consistent with that with your light source. If the light's coming in over here to the left, then you want those shadows, you know, on the underneath side of the right side of the boils that you make on these. Cloud bases are largest near the viewer, and lots of colors in those cloud bases. Blues, violets, browns. Sometimes you'll see greens. A lot of times you'll see reflections of the land below, whatever the major color is. We see a lot of violet here in Arkansas, particularly in the summer. There's some beautiful violet clouds and some violet shifts. So you can put a lot of color in that. Of course, in perspective, clouds are going to recede and they're going to get smaller in the distance and closer together. And I'll show some examples of that. And also, cloud tops get increasingly red-violet in the distance. You know, when we think about mountains, a lot of times we're looking at something that gets increasingly gray, blue, or purple. But with clouds, it's different. It's the other end of the color spectrum. So again, a thing to keep in mind as we look at these. And they lighten towards the horizon, and the sky does too as well. So there's the flat bases on clouds. Most clouds will have them not exactly, you know, flat like a ruler line, but definitely a flat base where the hot air rises off of the ground, and when it reaches a certain height where you get the cooler temperature, the moisture in the air will condense, and that's where the cloud will form, and it's usually at a definite height there, just like you can see in that picture. And so those cloud bases are going to be flat because of that. Here's a great perspective photo of clouds. And you can see as they go into the distance, they get smaller and closer together. You can think of them just like waves on the water. It works exactly the same, only upside down. You know, the water waves, as you look out across the sea, get closer and closer together and smaller and smaller. And the same with these clouds. It's a great perspective photo there. You can see your vanishing point right there at the end of the highway. And the clouds will have that same vanishing point, by the way. So here it is. Clouds become more red as they recede toward the horizon. Just really the opposite of things on a distant picture to throw in a bit of violet back there. You can see that's just sort of hints of clouds in that little tiny sketch. Put those violets in there. It warms up the sky, warms up your picture, adds a little more complexity, a little more interest. Also, you'll notice in that little picture there, I didn't worry about getting a perfectly flat, smooth wash or anything. A lot of people will try and do that every time, and it's really not necessary. Skies are a lot more interesting when you can put a lot of movement and things into them. Although sometimes you need a good flat white one or blue one, and there are ways to do that too. There, now take a look at this photo, and you can see those violets, and it's a good thing to keep in your mind, where does the violet actually occur? And you'll see along the tops it's generally white, and the violet is going to be just sort of within the shadow area and just above it, and make a shadow itself. So you don't want the entire cloud violet necessarily at all, and you want to make sure those tops of the clouds stay white. And if you're aiming for more realism, don't feel like they always have to be real though. There, see, we have this great picture of the yellow tint in those clouds, like I was talking about there. The sun should be to the right of that cloud. And if you look at the cloud boil over there on the left, you'll see that indeed the shadows are on the left side and underneath that big boil towards the center of the cloud shape. Some clouds are backlit, and in that case, you see it's white all the way around, and that center of that cloud can be very, very dark and gray. And this is an optical effect that also happens sometimes if you get a little tiny cloud up, it'll be very gray, and you'll wonder, well, why is that one gray and the others are white? And it all has to do with where it is in the sky in relation to the sun. And it can really fool your eye into making you think that what is actually a white cloud looks very gray. So this is an interesting cloud too, is it's heart-shaped. My last class pointed that out to me. I never even noticed it. I was just looking at backlit aspects of it. But there's a nice heart there for Valentine's Day. So intensify the blue if you want to increase your contrast with the white cloud. If you have a very pale blue up there along the top of your cloud, it's going to pretty much blend in with the cloud itself. So you can heighten and intensify and really bring that cloud out more in a 3D effect if you'll put a little darker blue behind areas of that cloud, especially towards the top. Sharp edges on the cloud are usually facing the sun. They'll have the hardest edge. And away from the sun, you can soften those with your brush. Just as soon as you make that cloud, go in there with a wet brush, and just along the very edge of it, drag some water through there and soften that edge up on the sides away from the sun on your boils. Also along the bottom edge of the shadow where it merges into the cloud, it's a good idea to soften that. You can have pretty sharp edges along the very bottom, and cloud bases are usually pretty ragged, so you wouldn't want something precisely flat or anything like that. The thing with the clouds and sky is it's easy to get too much paint. Go pretty light, especially with the violets and the shadows. Take it easy on those. You can get pretty dark with the sky a lot of times and still look fine. But another thing, particularly on rainy days, the sky is actually more white than it is gray. And to increase that contrast in your painting, you need to remember that and not get your sky itself gray. But generally, it just really doesn't look like that. And that's a fair weather sky, lots of warm colors in this one. Clouds you can make by wiping out with a wet wash on the paper you're using. It depends on how wet your sky is at the time and the type of paint you're using. You know, like I say, if you're using phthalo blue, don't expect to wipe out a sky because it's probably stuck there. You can get out a little. A good tissue and a blotter. Another way to get an interesting cloud shape is your kitchen roll or tissue and twist it up like this, and then kind of dab it onto your sky, and you'll get some real nice kind of flat stratiform kind of clouds with a good irregular shape made that way. And you can kind of smear it around or whatever to get variation. But that's a good quick way to get some nice stratiform clouds up there. Cumulus work just fine with some tissue of any kind. You'd be surprised, kitchen tissue and toilet paper, they all, a Kleenex or something like that, all kind of give you a little bit different texture, and you just kind of have to experiment with what works best. I like this kitchen tissue because it's kind of coarse, and it has a better scraping action, and especially for a cirrus cloud like up at the top up here, it tends to take them out better. So I like to do that with them. Another thing that I find very useful, white gouache. You need to do something with a cloud. This opaque white gouache is just perfect. You can go in, a lot of times I'll show you some clouds I've done that with. The biggest thing with white gouache is you think you're overdoing it, but when it dries, a lot of times it'll be quite a bit more transparent. So you might have to put on a couple of coats sometimes if you don't get it on thick enough the first time. And with gouache, it comes right off if you want. You can re-wet it and wipe it off with a sponge or a kitchen towel, and you're pretty much back where you started. So it's really a nice tool to use and have. I always keep a small tube in my sketch kit and use it for things like that. I've saved some messed up skies with gouache. So things, if you want something to really look lofty and high up in the air, put your cloud behind it. See how on this slide it's behind the mountain? If you were to put that cloud base above the mountain, kind of psychologically, it might look like it's kind of squashing the mountain down. But by having it back behind it, it makes the mountain itself go up. Try not to make the cloud shape the same as the mountain. A lot of people do that unconsciously, and that's a mistake that often really shows up once you start thinking about it. But you can use this, I don't know if you'd call it a trick, but a method here, like behind buildings and different things like that, to increase the height of what you're drawing, the appearance of that height anyway. So this particular drawing comes from a book called Skies and the Artist by Eric Sloan. And at one time, that book was really hard to get. And finally, at a library in Oklahoma, I got a paper, mimeograph kind of copy, not mimeograph, but just on copier paper, and used it. He did a lot of barn paintings and things like that. It's probably what he's most known for. But also, he was a weatherman in the Air Force in World War II. So he has a very good knowledge of clouds. And so his book on Skies and the Artist has a lot of very useful information in it that I've taken from it. And some of these pages right in through here come from that. They were all black and white. I just put some color on this with a little bit of Photoshop. But you can see how he's talking about how clouds and airflow move. Clouds boil up. I really like this illustration in the bottom right corner, showing the arrows, showing how those things move and boil, whereas the one on the left just sort of slumps, and all of the boils are the same size and very regular, solid outline around that. Really not the way to do a sky. If I were sketching this too, even on the side on the right, that top line on the cloud is too heavy. Really should be lighter, heavier maybe in the shadow areas, but you got to vary your line weight, like we've talked about in our earlier classes, to really make this stand out, show what you're trying to show. Here's another good thing is we're using clouds to push boats and show action. As you can see with this sailboat, if those clouds lean into that boat and the boat has to lean away from it. If you had the boat leaning the other way, it just kind of looks strange. It looked like something was not right in that, because the storm is actually, you can see it leaning and moving in in a certain direction. Also, you'll notice the bands of rain on that cloud there on the right. They point towards the direction of the movement of the cloud itself. A lot of people will do the opposite on that, but generally that's not the case. You've got air pushing in front of that cloud and boiling it up over the top. And so that rain generally will slant kind of toward the direction that it's going to. So good thing to remember there when you're drawing rain lines in your clouds. Basic sky washes. Most people know that you grade a sky from the top to the bottom. Darkest are going to be up the top. Another thing you can do, and it's very useful, is darken each of the upper corners. I didn't do that in this particular wash that I made, but that's a good device to hold the viewer's eye into the picture. They'll come up to that darker area and then they'll drop back down and stay into your photo. But it's not really realistic and not the way the sky actually works, which is more like this. It's graded from top to bottom, but also it gets lighter toward the source of the light, which is the sun. So you've got a gradation going from right to left and one from top to bottom. And these are a lot harder to paint, actually. You know, you start off with a good dark mix up in that corner up there. As you go across with your wash, you're going to have to dip it in some water before you're finished and lighten it up along the way, and then kind of rinse out the brush almost to dry it out anyway, and then repeat as you go down. So it's a little more complicated. And with sketching, actually, you know, you don't have to do something like this. This is much better to do if you're doing a larger picture, you know, quarter sheet or maybe, you know, half sheets, full sheets. Then you're really looking at getting the sky right all the way around. Lots of times when I do skies, as you'll see, they're far from a perfect sky. Warm the sky at the bottom, as you'll see there. You can put in some yellow. For some reason, I put in quinacridone gold on this one, a real light wash of it. I use that in land a lot in place of raw sienna. For one thing, quinacridone doesn't get so gritty in your palette when it dries up. I use tube paint, and I squirt them into half pans and let them dry. And raw sienna always gets kind of, I don't know, really grainy, gritty. And quinacridone gold doesn't do that. And the colors are, when they're light, are just very, very similar. And so it's just an easier color to work with and has actually a lot more various things you can do with it. So I really recommend it over raw sienna. There's a simple cloud with gouache, one cloud. Now, if you're going to do a painting, don't do one cloud in your sky or two clouds that are exactly the same, you know, next to each other. That looks really boring and really doesn't look like nature either. And a flat horizontal cloud is fine. It conveys a feeling of rest and tranquility to have anything horizontal in your pictures, particularly landscapes. But you can really use these skies to do whatever you need done. Don't feel like you have to paint what's up there. Use your sky. It's a tool, and use it to direct your composition and things like that. So with this simple cloud, I put some cobalt blue down. I lifted out a bit. It still stained the paper more than I wanted. Although, you know, a lot of clouds are kind of a light blue, and you can leave it at that. And if you darken it around it, just the contrast will make it look a lot lighter. So you can do that. But I put white gouache in this. And while the white gouache was still wet, I went up there and I put in a little bit of violet colors. I put in a little bit of Naples yellow, warm it up. On that shadow on the bottom, I usually use a mix of burnt sienna and alizarin crimson, and I just have this always mixed up. It's about a 50-50 mix, and I'll put it in a whole pan. Let me pull one out here. I'll show you. If I can. What I do with it. There's my palette. Okay, and right here. Get this up over there. We go. that's my full pan. One of the few full pans I generally use. Sometimes I keep a full one of sap green as well. But I just mix it up right there in the pan, squirt out about equal amounts out of my paint tubes, and then stir it up with a toothpick. And that's a good go-to gray. If you need it warmer, add a little bit more burnt sienna. If you need it cooler, add a little bit more ultramarine. And you've got a very usable gray that makes some nice granulation and quite useful for a number of things. I'd say I use it as much as any paint that I have. Rather than try and paint the shadow of the cloud into that white space that you've left for the cloud, just use your blue beneath that white space. And that way you can conserve the white of your cloud a lot better. Sometimes your shadow will end up going up so high you don't have white cloud left. So paint on the blue underneath the white rather than up into the white when you want to do your shadow. Also on this one, I added some white gouache up around, like I had talked about that, just to make that show up better for one thing on the PowerPoint here. But that's a very simple cloud and an easy way to do it. That little end over on the right, that's just white gouache. It's just so simple to just pat your brush down there and you can get some real nice cloud effects with that. A hint of the sky can be enough. There you go, see that? I put in one sweep of blue. There's the sky and a bird. It can get simpler. You don't have to put anything, but that's enough. It was good enough for Marin. He did a lot of skies like that. So here's another one I use, just a hint of a sky. It adds depth to the picture. This was done with an Inktense pencil, and I just barely touched the pencil to the sky for that, and then took a water brush like that and scrubbed it in just a little bit, spread it around. And that's enough sky for that. Especially on a cloudy day, that can be plenty of sky. And so I would leave it at that. Again, you can use your skies. This is an example of actually using your sky to do what you want. Here's a picture of the Quapaw Bath House at Hot Springs. And I intensified the blue around that white building so that that building would pop out better. And you can do that. You could have made it, I could have made it even darker and it stood out better and been fine. And you can see how in the top of that, you know, I didn't worry about a nice smooth wash or anything like that. I just kind of swirled it in a sort of a cloud shape and went with whatever was there. I probably turned that sketch upside down and started at the building and worked down. Using a water brush, you never even have to, you know, stop and get some water. You just give it a little squeeze, and if it's too much, you can dab it off with a paper towel or whatever, or just spread it around some more while you're going, so you never have to stop. Sorry, can you hear me now? I did bad things.
We can hear you.
Okay, I don't know how I hit that. There we go. Okay, something really happening. Things are slowing down. There we go. Okay, I think we're back. Sunny skies. There you can see I didn't worry about smooth washes. I just took my water brush and went up in there. I start with darker blues up towards the top. I use warmer, darker ultramarine there to the top left. Put in a patch of that. Then I came down with cerulean blue, put some of that in, and got rid of that, and put in some yellow there right above the top of the River Market building. Later, I came in after that. I didn't even bother letting it dry or anything. I just came in and patted a little bit of violet in there to warm up the sky and make some shadows. Notice I put the violet underneath the white areas into that blue to make those cloud shadows. That a nice kind of a warm summery picture. Usually sunny summer skies, I'll use a lot of warm colors. Here's a cloudy winter picture. The stratiform clouds, even those I didn't keep straight horizontally. As you can see, I put my clouds in an angle quite a bit. Like you'll see here, if this one, there it goes, see. And if you'll notice, this is called a thrust and a counter thrust. I have the River Market building, it's thrusting up to the left top corner. So I have my sky thrusting down from the right top corner. And it kind of counterbalances it and keeps the River Market building from taking off and zooming up into the sky and off of the page. Kind of holds it in place. And so that's one really useful use of your sky in your composition, is to do that. Also, it adds more dynamism to the painting. When you've got something angular, it looks unsteady, like it might fall over. And so that in itself is motion and action and tension that you can put in a painting that wouldn't normally be there. And again, here I'm probably overdo this a lot of times, but I rarely do put in a flat layer of sky on this. Usually in the winter skies, I use a lot of cool colors. In the shadows, I almost always use cool blues mixed with grays and complementary colors. In summer shadows, I'll usually use much more purple and red mixed with my gray, warm it up. But not in winter. And this is kind of a wintry, cool, rainy day picture here. Brown, burnt sienna works really well in skies at this time of year. And for a lot of stormy skies as well. And some days, I know I've been walking over here in Maumelle, Lake Willistine a couple of years ago, maybe last year even, and you'll look up at the sky in the morning, and if the clouds are really low, they'll really have a brown base to them. I don't know if that's air pollution or reflections off of land and water and whatnot, but they'll be very brown. So those clouds and skies are on the cool side for winter scenes. If you want to warm them up, here's some good examples. Just having yellow in your skin, that's all. And you can have brown in your trees and just blues for shadows. You can see on these too. But I use a lot of yellow in my sky, and sometimes just yellow, just for the warmth that it provides, a nice morning kind of a look. A lot of sketches. Here's the old drugstore in Argenta. As you'll notice, I just put a sky kind of vignetted around the building and left it at that. I used various colors in that. I used cerulean, cobalt teal, and cobalt violet. Again, I generally like to have more than one color in a sky, but you just don't have to paint the whole sky, or the whole sketch for that matter, when you're out doing it. And notice I didn't paint that pickup. I didn't paint the people. I was interested in the drugstore, and so that's what I highlighted. And, here's an example of using horizontal clouds purposefully. As you'll notice, this is a really horizontal picture, and that's why I painted it. I just thought it was really neat, because we have a horizontal street, we have a horizontal sidewalk, a horizontal line of shrubberies there, and that the Kroger gas station with a big flat horizontal shape through there. And so I put horizontal clouds too to emphasize that. And the military planes were flying over, as they often do here in town. And I just thought that made a very horizontal painting. That's why I did that. And again, the clouds should get smaller as they recede to the horizon. But when you're out sketching, using a small sketchbook, you really don't always have a lot of room for that sort of thing. And you just kind of have a small portion of sky to contend with. So not always something you can do, even if you know it ought to be like that. Foggy days, fog and mist, go to diffuse colors and lights. A lot of times things will look almost black or very, very dark. As they recede into the distance, they tend to get blue with the atmosphere, bluey gray, white color. Again, you can warm it up. This was a September day. And it's fairly warm out. There's still a lot of greenery on the trees. And so I put some warm colors in the fog, even with that hint of yellow where maybe the sun is, things like that. Again, Naples yellow works really well for that. Here we go with buildings receding in the distance and fog. This is Crail. This is where my son lives. And so I get lots of chances to paint this place. It's really a good place to paint. And you can see as I go into the distance, buildings are muted. All the colors are muted because it's cloudy. And then they get gray as you go farther back, a blue-gray. Generally, it'll mix again. It'll be my ultramarine burnt sienna mix is generally what I'll use for something like that. Morning skies, kind of soft. There's just something different about a morning sky compared to a sunset sky. Softer, mistier. I use very kind of pastel-ish sort of colors. Nothing terribly intense like you might see in a sunset. I'm out in the mornings a lot. So those would be the colors I use. Generally, it's Naples yellow and alizarin crimson, or quinacridone rose works really well. Quinacridone rose can be really intense, so you have to put a lot of water with that. But it's really a good sky color. Again, the sky would be very soft colors and be some grays in it, like this picture of the Taj Mahal I did down here, working on a commission for some friends who wanted a large picture from their travels. Sunsets, I don't do a lot of them. There's a quick sketch from Mather Lodge. Generally, it's considered best not to even put the sun in it for a lot of sunsets and just go with cloud colors. But I put in the sunset. There was a lot of mist hanging around in the valleys there and fog at Mather Lodge, and it made a nice sunset, so I put that in there. A lot of my sunset pictures mostly are sky opposite the sun. Often, that one at New York City, the sky is just purple. In the evening, the sun was reflecting off of that large building. Made for an interesting sketch while I sat at the airport, waiting for the plane. Same as this Oxford sketch here. It was evening, sun going down. We had beautiful purples and blues in the silhouettes of the buildings at Oxford and all the university colleges, and a nice yellow glow in the background. And of course, you can do this whether it's there or not.
Hey, Ken.
Moonrises are really interesting because you can have a combination of warm and cool colors there. Here we have the sun shining on that chimney, nice warm, late in the evening, just this beautiful golden hour colors of lots of golds and warm yellows in everything, especially in the sunlight hitting buildings. You get a lot of shadow contrast. So it's a great time to paint. And then opposite the sun, as you can see towards the moon there, things are getting gray and blue. So it's really a nice time of day to paint. You can get some interesting sky effects.
Hey, Ken, we've run a little bit over.
Uh-oh.
And we've got people who are hanging in here. You have 22, 23 people who are participating today. I wanted just to cut in because we did say we would end a little bit earlier and just let people go if they need to, and to tell everyone that this will be the whole thing. And I'm going to let you keep going here in just a moment. Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt. But this whole recording will be on our Life Quest of Arkansas website. And so if you need to leave, you can pick it back up and start it from the beginning and watch it on your device from our website under online engagements. You have to click on there a couple times to find his class. And please email me or Gina at LifeQuest if you have any questions. So, and Ken, I think you're going to take some questions at the end. Is that correct?
Sure.
Okay.
And I'll be wrapping up here in probably about 10 minutes. I think I'm pretty much at the end on this.
Okay. So participants, if you need to leave the meeting, just hit your leave meeting. You won't be rude. And then you can see the recording from our website. Go ahead, Ken. I'll stop.
Okay. Rain and storms are lots of fun to do. You can really get carried away. I got into making lightning, I guess a couple of years ago, and did this painting over on the left. They were digging up our street and had a track hoe parked across the street from my house. And so I could paint that and gave it a dramatic background with lightning. That lightning was sketched in with a gel pen, by the way. A Signo broad gel pen. Works really well for something like that. Put a lot of violets up in there with the lightning. Colors you can use in these sorts of things, again, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna for grays. Pain grays works really well. A lot of people don't like to use pain gray. Is use too much of it, it can kind of look flat. But it works really well for clouds, rain clouds, things like that. Violets, yellows. Perylene green is also another really good color for a very stormy sky. A lot of times the sky will have that green look to it. It seems like the last time we had tornadoes around this area, the sky was really kind of green. So you can put that up there. That's a green, Perylene green is one I use a lot for a lot of things, and vegetation shadows and things like that. That little painting on the left is one we did in one of my classes last year at the Center on the Lake at Maumelle, and we're making rain. And the way I did that was I took a brush full of probably Payne's gray on that, and right there where the rain starts up towards the upper right, I just put a pretty heavy swatch of Payne's gray across it, and the paper was still wet, but it wasn't wet enough to really flow well. And so again, I took my mister here and one squirt of the mister, and it will just drop that rain straight out of the cloud. And just kind of tilt your paper around till you get the angle that you want, and it will flow really well. If you use more than one squirt, a lot of times it's too much even, at least with my little mister bottles. But that's a real good way to get rain. Rain can be hard to get. It takes just the raw wetness on the paper to really get it to flow and stream down. That's a good thing to just practice and get some paper and make you several little 5x7 squares and paint in sky and clouds and rain until you become comfortable with it. You don't do it often though. Tend to kind of forget how to the amount of water you really need and things like that. Just to show how colors shift when you have a very cloudy day. Notice the lower left-hand corner, nice bright colors in the churches, red, that nice bright red brick. But on a cloudy day, up there in the right, notice how everything is muted. Not just the church building itself, but the vegetation. Everything takes on a muted tone. And if you didn't match that, it would look kind of strange to have real bright vegetation and bright brickwork and everything, and a dark cloudy sky. It would maybe like the sun was shining on it from another direction or something. And it can do that. You kind of have to plan for a composition like that. Wind, you can use atmospheric lines. I did this one in charcoal and watercolor on top of the charcoal, which is a fun thing to do, and then put in those white lines with just a white Prismacolor colored pencil. So you can do that. You can do it with ink. You have to be real careful with ink that you get a nice smooth line. You've got to draw from your shoulder. Don't try and do a long line from your wrist or your fingers. Use your whole shoulder. Get that nice smooth line in with it. Night skies, lots of dark colors, of course. I use indigo, Prussian blue, Payne's gray, Perylene green, and violets. You can use a lot of other greens as well, actually, and kind of a greenish tinted night sky, especially with moonlight, looks real good if you do that. If you use too much indigo, too much Prussian, or too much Payne's gray, it's going to look kind of flat, kind of like this does. This is mostly indigo I used on this little train picture. It was just a quick little sketch I did. And as you can see, not a smooth sky on that, lots of movement in it. There's another dark sky, and that one has a lot of blue in it. You can tell, even though it's a nighttime sky, and yellow moon. Here are busy skies, and that's where my old bristle brush comes in handy. The way to make skies like that is to get your paint pretty dry on your brush. You may have to pat it out on a tissue and then lay it flat right down onto the paper and scrub around like this, and every which way you can twirl your brush, and essentially like that, and barely touching the paper so that you get all kinds of skips and spaces, and you can get a really interesting sky that you couldn't get in any other way. So it's a technique I really recommend. And you can see I used lots of color in that little piece of sky there. Or you can do dynamic skies. I scrubbed this one in with colored pencils, watercolor. I used a little bit of everything on this. One of the things I was trying to do was get a twist in the sky, sort of a spiral going up. And the way I tried to do that is, if you'll notice on the right side, see the warm reds, warm colors advance. On the left side, blues and violets, so they would recede, so it kind of twist the sky around like that. That was a fun experiment. That's the Arlington Hotel in Hot Springs, if you ever wondered what that's supposed to be. Birds. It's always good to have birds in your sky. I use them a lot. They add life to your pictures, and it's good practice drawing different kinds of birds. I go to Scotland every year, so I do a lot of seagulls. And also pigeons. Pigeon wings are kind of triangular and pretty easy to draw. And seagulls aren't hard either after you've done a number of them. Because birds are pretty small when they're up in the sky. Around Little Rock, lots of pigeons around, and you can put a pigeon in the sky. So keep sketching. Concentrate on your landscape elements, add them, make them a part of your sketch, and maybe try some of the things we talked about today. And again, just interpret them in your own way. You know, don't feel like you're bound to any particular way of having to do this. I'm open to questions. If this thing will work, we'll give it a try. If you have any.
You are all free to unmute your own microphones if you have a question. If you would prefer to raise your hand digitally, I'll be looking for blue hands as well. And I do want to emphasize, we really do want your feedback. This is our very first Zoom class, and so tell us what worked, what didn't work, what would be helpful. And you can do that by emailing info@lifequestofarkansas.org. Okay, questions? I'm looking.
I have one. Can you hear me?
Yes, Lynn.
I was taking pictures. Did it bother you, Ken? Could you?
No, not at all.
Okay,
no.
Good.
No, I wouldn't have known had you not said so.
Okay, thank you.
One other thing I might say is I would have done demonstrations, but the Zoom quality is such that a lot of the watercolors just don't show up, and that's why I didn't paint anything.
Yeah, it was very good. Thank you.
Hi, Ken. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Are you going to post the PowerPoint on Facebook or anything?
I'll tell you what, anybody that wants a PDF file of this PowerPoint, if they will send me your email address, I will send you a PDF file.